What is going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Wednesday Football Talk Show here with Ben Hall and my guy Trey Watson. In the NFL this week, we had a crazy week, and it's kind of crazy the week's not even over yet. We still got another game on Wednesday. But overall, it's been a crazy week. You know, we had wide receiver from the practice squad playing quarterback. We've had games moved 3 days now. So it's been very crazy. But how you doing today, Trey?
Doing good, man. Like you said, there's a lot going on. Schedules are changing. Things are going on literally every day right now. And somehow the NFL is playing all the games. No cancellations just yet, so they're finding a way.
For our first game, Thanksgiving Day, the Lions-Texans. This was another terrible game for the Lions. The Texans just played great. Deshaun Watson threw for 318 yards and 4 touchdowns, which we've kind of been talking about all year. Deshaun Watson deserves some more respect, and he did it. A great game against the Lions, which I kind of expected just with the way the Lions have been playing lately. You know, they came off of a loss, 20-0 loss to the Panthers, and I kind of expected the Texans to come out and beat them, but not as handily as they did, especially on Thanksgiving where the Lions usually play pretty well. But this game led to Matt Patricia and GM Bob Quinn being fired, which for a lot of Lion fans I think is a good thing. And I think a lot of them are hoping they may go out and get Eric Bieniemy in the offseason to sign as their head coach from the offensive coordinator from the Chiefs. But, yeah, like I said, just a big day from Deshaun Watson and the Texans. And I didn't even state Will Fuller played great, but now he's out for the year with a 6-game suspension to PEDs. So that's actually pretty crazy as well.
Yeah, man, I think, coming in, I expected the Texans to do what they needed to do to win. A lot of that is because of Deshaun Watson, and even with everything that's been going on with their team and the franchise as a whole, he's found a way to play well, and that's, basically exactly what he did on Thanksgiving. It's definitely tough to lose Will Fuller. That PED thing, all those guys kind of always have the same story. Like, well, they told me it was safe and then it wasn't. I mean, that's like why they have like 8 or freaking even more levels of like checklist and a list of literally things. Hey, you can take this. We know it's not a problem. So I feel for him and their team. But, I mean, at the end of the day, man, you're responsible for that kind of stuff. So you just hope he learns from that and doesn't run into that issue again. But as far as the Lions, it was definitely expected that after the way things have gone for so long, people were kind of wondering why he had as long of a leash as he did. And it's because, so much respect had been built up for him because he was under Coach Belichick and all that kind of stuff in New England. But it's kind of been the same story when those, so far anyway, the guys who leave under Belichick haven't done as well as people would expect. I think down in Miami, Coach Flores is doing better than, the average, at least for those guys. And he's kind of making that – he's kind of the anomaly for them right now.
Yeah, definitely. For our next game, the other Thanksgiving Day game was the Washington football team versus the Cowboys. This I didn't expect at all. I did not see the Washington football team coming out and beating the Cowboys the way they did. Antonio Gibson had a big day. He was really the difference. He had 115 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. And Terry McLaurin also played well for that offense. But the Washington football team's offense, besides those two, really didn't do too much. But I think the big thing in this game was Zeke struggling. Zeke is the man of that offense, or he had been in previous years, and this year we haven't seen it. But last week, he started to play good again. And as I said, I thought that was a difference. And coming to this game, I think he only had like 36 rushing yards, which for a guy who's been considered one of the best running backs in the league to only have 36 yards on a big game, a divisional opponent, when a win, you could maybe slip into the playoffs. Just kind of crazy, you can't get your guy going again. But Amari Cooper had a big day, and that was really the only player for the Cowboys offense that really played well. He had 112 receiving yards and a touchdown. But like I said, the Washington football team, as bad as they were early in the year, and just because they're in the NFC East, they have a shot at making the playoffs now, and they're actually kind of playing pretty good football right now. So they're a team that might actually get into the playoffs in the next few weeks between them, the Eagles who lost. I don't think the Eagles will be in, but between them and the Giants, I believe.
Yeah, man, I think, the Redskins are getting enough together at the right time to take advantage of what's going on in the NFC East. Their defense is solid for the most part, especially up front in the interior. They've got guys who can make plays. And then Gibson, had a great game, got into a rhythm. And Alex Smith, he's not going to hurt them at the end of the day, which that's really all they need. McLaurin will make enough plays by himself, and then if they keep the running game going, within that division, they should be able to pull it out, I feel like.
So for our next game, the Raiders Falcons, this was big surprise of the week as well. I did not see the Falcons beating the Raiders, let alone beating them the way they did by so many points. But just the Raiders offense just looked horrible as a whole. Derek Carr didn't play the way he had been all year. The one interception that the Falcons returned for a touchdown really killed the whole game, and nothing changed after that. It seemed like the Raiders maybe were getting some momentum going on offense, but after that pick six, it was kind of like everything was over. But Ito Smith filled in for Todd Gurley well. I think he rushed for 60 yards and a touchdown, which was pretty crazy. The Falcons' defense really stepped up against the Raiders' offense, who I'd been talking really high of, and they just kind of let me down. I expected way more out of the Raiders, especially right now when they're fighting for a wild card spot, and games like that are needed, especially with the way the Falcons have played all year. But like I said, it was a very impressive win out of the Falcons, and I was not expecting it.
Yeah, man, it was definitely one of the biggest surprises of the weekend. Just because, we'd seen the Raiders compete in big games, specifically against the Chiefs. And the Falcons were even without Julio and Todd Gurley, so an already down team. You expect them to win that game, and like you said, they really needed it and failed in a lot of ways. So it's going to be tough for them to get back on track. But the Falcons did play really well. They took advantage of, poor play from the Raiders and a lot of penalties too. But honestly, that game does nothing for the Falcons, if we're being honest. They're going to be a top 10 draft pick team, and honestly, all that did was maybe put some other people in front of them. So we'll see what happens. But, at the end of the day, that one's just tough for a Raider fan. You're trying to get into the playoffs late.
So for our next game, the Chargers-Bills, it was a relatively close game throughout most of the game. I think the Bills took a 17-point lead at one point in the third quarter, but the Chargers battled back. Herbert continues to play great. He had one pick, which was a little bit of a mistake, but other than that, he played really well. Eckler coming back for the Chargers was, I think, a pretty big step forward for them, at least in the passing game. He caught a lot of passes. He didn't run for as much, but I don't know if they were really using him in the run game as much because he was coming back from injury. But Keenan Allen played well. Josh Allen played all right. Gabriel Davis and Devin Singletary for the Bills offense really looked good. And I think this game the outcome was kind of expected. The Chargers have been having a little bit of a down year, and the Bills having a pretty good year. So it was a 10-point loss for the Chargers, who are pretty banged up. So on both sides, I really didn't see anything too bad. But like I said, the Bills got a needed win, and they're definitely one of the top teams in the AFC as of right now.
Yeah, man, when the Bills put it together, they look really good. Besides like a sequence in that game where it was Josh Allen fumble, Herbert threw the interception, then Josh Allen came right back and threw another interception too. Besides that, short sequence, the Bills looked really good for the most part. And at the end of the day, they got a win. So, they keep themselves really at the top of that AFC East. It's going to be interesting down the stretch, man. I know they have a game against the Steelers that a lot of people are going to be watching in a couple weeks. They're going to have to play the Dolphins again, which is going to probably decide who wins that division. So, they got some big games coming up, but they're looking good all around.
For the next game, the Giants-Bengals, this was a pretty good game. I think we saw what taking away Joe Burrow from that Bengals offense does. It's not really their year just in general. I think they're rebuilding still, and in the future, the Bengals could be pretty good, but when you take Joe Burrow away from that offense, their offense isn't going to do too much. But for the Giants, Daniel Jones, before getting hurt, was playing really well. It's not good for them just because they still, as I said before, have a chance to compete for the playoffs, and taking away their starting quarterback and playing Colt McCoy is really going to hurt, I think. But for the Giants on defense, James Bradbury has been playing great this year. He's really playing like a Pro Bowl caliber, all pro caliber talent. And he's got some big challenges ahead of him. I think he's got DeAndre Hopkins, and they've got a couple more tough opponents with good wide receivers. So we'll see how he plays down the stretch. But as of right now, I think he could be consideration for all pro.
Yeah, man. I think the Giants did enough to win a game that they needed to win to stay in that conversation with, in my opinion, the Redskins. I don't think the Eagles can do enough the way their roster looks right now and the way things are going. But they did what they needed to do. Like you said, without Joe Burrow, the Bengals aren't going to be the same, and they were already struggling, as it is. But they put up a good fight and made the game interesting. But right now the difference is that Giants defense is playing, with some confidence. They're attacking guys, and they're going to give them a chance, in that division.
For the next game, the Titans-Colts, I expected the Titans to win, but not by the amount of points that they did. The big difference here was Derrick Henry. I did not expect him to do what he did against that Colts defense, who had been playing well all year. A.J. Brown's playing really well for the Titans. Him and Tannehill didn't have a big day, but Tannehill's doing what he needs to do for them to win games. He beat the Ravens, beat teams in the past, and then they got the revenge game against the Colts, which was a huge win for the Titans right now as they regain their spot in the AFC South. But like I said, I just think the Titans are doing what they need to win games right now, and they're slowly coming upon like they did last year in the AFC South. Early in the year they didn't play too well. Well, this year they were playing well, but they came back, beat the Colts in a game they needed to because the Colts were one game ahead. But for the Colts, I think they were hurt by COVID. A lot of starters were missing, I think 3 or 4, and one of them being Jonathan Taylor, their starting running back, which is really tough for them. But like I said, the big difference in this game was Derrick Henry, and he's really starting to come along just like he did last year.
Yeah, man, Derrick Henry's kind of known as a second half of the season playoff kind of guy, and it's just starting, at the perfect time for them. It looked really good. It was basically the inverse of the first game. The Colts kind of were dominating most of the last game, and the Titans did everything they needed to do this time. A.J. Brown even got a, onside kick return for a touchdown. I know, that kind of hurts guys' feelings when you think you have a chance to come back and you're fighting, and then something like that happens. You can just, it just kind of deflates you as a team. But it's a tough loss for the Colts, and that division is going to stay heated. And now it depends on, how those teams finish against the rest of their division opponents. And then really just, kind of one has to hope for the other to lose.
Yeah, definitely. For our next game, the Browns-Jaguars, this was the Browns continue to get by terrible teams just by a little bit. Their one signature win this year, you could say, was the Colts. It was a good win for them. But they really could have lost this game against the Jaguars. The Jaguars didn't get a 2-point conversion late, and that really did the game. But like I said last week, I think getting Jarvis Landry involved more will win them games. And I think that was the big difference here. He had 8 catches for 143 yards and a touchdown. He's been really inconsistent this year. And this week they got him a lot of targets, and it really paid off. But also Nick Chubb had a huge day. He had 144 yards and a touchdown. So I think that Browns offense could be doing a little bit more than it is. I think Baker struggled. The one touchdown he missed was god-awful. Had a guy wide open, missed him by a ton. But like I said, I think getting Jarvis Landry involved for that offense is really going to help them, and they have to now with Odell out. But for the Jaguars, James Robinson had a good day. He had a touchdown and 128 yards, I think. But when Mike Glennon's playing quarterback, you're not going to expect to win many games, let alone beat the Browns, who are now 8-3. So the Browns are second in the AFC North and continuing to do what they need to do to win games.
Yeah, man, I think it's been fortunate for the Browns that, their division, the cross-division games that they drew this year have not been very competitive. So that's worked out for them, really well. And they've taken advantage. 8-3 is 8-3, however you get it done. So we'll see how they play down the stretch and what they can do, in the postseason. But realistically, I just don't see them as one of the top threats, particularly in the AFC. With the teams that they've got there. I just feel like, when it comes to one of those big games, I don't see them beating the Titans, the Colts, definitely not the Steelers or, the Chiefs. So we'll see what happens. But, they put themselves in a good position, and they're almost guaranteed to get a playoff spot with a record like that, and the rest of the schedule that they have, is pretty favorable.
For our next game, the Panthers-Vikings, this was a great game. The loser basically is eliminated from the playoffs. I don't expect either team to get in, but the loser of this game was definitely going to be put out. The Vikings played well throughout the game. They came back late. Justin Jefferson had a big day, 2 touchdowns and 70 yards. He's been arguably the top wide receiver in the NFL as a whole right now. Kirk Cousins had one of his top games. He always has an up and down season, and this was one of his big games. For the Panthers, DJ Moore, we saw him get hurt. Robbie Anderson played well, but we saw DJ Moore get hurt on a pass. He was wide open. Teddy Bridgewater threw it behind him, and he hurt his Achilles, I think. But they said He's not out for a while. They don't exactly know what he did yet, but I do not think it's going to be a severe injury, which is a good thing. But the Panthers, drove down the field with a little time left on the clock, and Joey Sly missed the field goal at the end, which would have won it. But the Vikings got another win. The Vikings have just been so inconsistent this year. But if they wanted to stay alive and have any shot at making the playoffs, this was a much-needed win, which they got.
Yeah, for sure, man. They bounced back off of a bad loss to the Cowboys last week, which really hurt those playoff chances you were talking about. But they started really slow to the season and have, as of late, been playing much more competitive, which is good for them. They took advantage of some opportunities against the Panthers, even after Jeremy Chin had the, back-to-back defensive touchdowns, and they dug themselves in that hole. But, in their division, they've got a chance, honestly, because I'm pretty sure they have to play the Bears again, and the Bears are as struggle bus as it gets right now. So maybe they can, find a way to slip in there in a late spot. They just got to overcome, a really tough start to the year.
For our next game, the Patriots-Cardinals, this was a crazy game for a lot of reasons. The Patriots got the unexpected win. Within the past 2 weeks, I think this is their second. They beat the Ravens, or the past 3 weeks. They beat the Ravens 3 weeks ago, which they were not expected to win. And then they come and beat the Cardinals, which is just insane. Their defense played so well. They stopped Kyler Murray, which was not expected. I expected Kyler Murray to have a huge week. And Cam's still struggling, but as I said, he got another win. The Patriots, they've shown some games they have what it takes to win, and they've also showed some games they can't even beat the Broncos. So they've been really up and down this year. But like I said, holding Kyler Murray to only like 160 or 70 yards is crazy, and that's what they needed to do to get the win. Down the stretch, I don't know. They've already pretty much eliminated themselves from the playoffs, so I think it will be best for them to tank, but you can't really teach a football team to tank. But the Cardinals, their playoff chances have went down a little bit. I still think they'll get in, but that's a really, really tough loss there to a not-so-good team at this point in the year.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough loss for the Cardinals just because they've been playing so well, the majority of the season. So I definitely didn't see that one coming. But the Patriots have been really up and down, like you said. Really, they beat the Ravens and then they win this game. And, if Cam doesn't fumble, most likely they beat the Bills. They would have had a pretty easy field goal. And maybe, their season looks a little different, adding that kind of win. But they are, they're in the spot that they're in right now. It helps the Cardinals out that the Rams lost to the 49ers. The Seahawks kind of got a little separation in that division, but, there's still room for them to compete and finish, pretty well down the end of the season. So we'll see what happens, but definitely an interesting one that the Cardinals probably should have had.
For our next game, the Dolphins-Jets, this was no surprise, definitely. The Jets offense, I just think, as bad, like when he was in Baltimore, Joe Flacco, I really wasn't a fan of. I never was, but as bad as he was or has been, I think he is better in that offense than Sam Darnold is. Surprisingly to say that, but Sam Darnold just struggles a lot. And it's a lot on the coaching or whatever you want to call it on, but I'm not a huge fan of Sam Darnold, and I actually think that offense is better with Joe Flacco. But for the Dolphins, Ryan Fitzpatrick played great. It was one of his good weeks. Devontae Parker, I think that was a big difference. Getting Devontae Parker involved more, had 100-plus receiving yards. And, yeah, this was an expected win. I think a lot of people are expecting the Jets to go 0-16 and draft Trevor Lawrence in the first round with the first overall pick if he leaves college, which is expected. So this was an expected win for the Dolphins and a much-needed one, especially coming off of last week's loss.
Yeah, man, I think it was big. Dolphins definitely needed that one to stay in the race, which, they can really do. They can really cause some problems late in the season and into the playoffs, depending on how they finish out. They have another one against the Patriots, I believe, and then they have the game against the Bills, which are going to be two big ones for them. But, the Jets are going to jet, man. They're playing the way they've been playing all year. There's just not a whole lot of good things to say anywhere on the team right now. That's where everyone's eyes are at, as far as the coach and maybe even the GM. I don't know. So we'll see what happens, as the season goes on with that. And, that's really all you have to say about New York.
For our next game, the Saints-Broncos, this was a very weird game. The Broncos, they had one quarterback test positive for COVID, and then the rest were close contacts, so they all had to sit out. So they played Kendall Hinton at quarterback. He hasn't played quarterback since his sophomore year at Wake Forest, I believe. And he didn't play well throwing the ball, but it's a pretty big task to go from a practice squad wide receiver to a starting quarterback against the Saints defense. So he completed a pass to Noah Fant for like 13 yards. And I think that was the only completion of the day. But like I said, it's a huge task, and a lot of respect to him for, taking on that task, going out there, taking a ton of hits, making some plays. But the Saints defense was just way too much for that Broncos offense. But the Saints on offense didn't throw the ball very much either. I think Taysom Hill had 70 some yards, but at the end of the day, they got the win, and it was a blowout win. And for the Saints, Latavius Murray had a monstrous day. So it was a good game for the Saints, especially when they weren't throwing the ball as well as they usually do.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty obvious once everyone heard that news that the Saints were going to be able to take care of business. I don't think anyone expected them to lose, even if they were at full power in Denver. But, everyone was talking about that story, man. I read earlier that, basically they all became close contacts when they had like an extra film session with the quarterbacks alone without masks. And everyone's all mad about that. I mean, you can't fault them for trying to, get prepared for a game. Obviously, right now they need to be wearing masks because of how big of an issue it is. And even, your teammates, you don't know where they've been or who they've been in contact with outside of, the stadium and whatnot. So it's tough situation. Definitely respect for Hinton, however you say his name, for giving his best effort. I mean, I don't even think he's been on the practice squad the entire year. So to be called within a day's time and, you have to play quarterback, the hardest position really to play, just the most information, the most everything. The Broncos tried to work around it, man. I mean, they started off the game, put every running back they had at Wildcat quarterback. But eventually that gets old. And, you just – at the NFL level, you can't do that a whole game and expect to get a whole lot. So it's tough, but I think, everyone kind of expected that one to end the way it did.
For our next game, the Rams 49ers. Last week when we did our pick'em, I told you this was the easiest pick of the week. I was going to take the Rams, and this was actually an upset. The 49ers got the win. I was almost 100% sure the Rams were going to win, and I was very wrong. The 49ers got some guys back from injury, Richard Sherman, Raheem Mostert, and that was big for them. But just the Rams, Jared Goff really didn't play well, and he hasn't been playing well lately. He started the year off very good and was getting talked about very well, but now lately he's not been playing too well. Cam Akers for the Rams offense had a good day, which was good for Rams fans because he hasn't really done too much this year. But for the 49ers, this was a huge win. Deebo Samuel had a big day. It was good to see him play well because, he's been dealing with injuries this year. And I think anytime he's healthy, he's going to be one of the biggest playmakers on that team. So it was good for that. But like I said, it was a big surprise, and it definitely didn't make me look good in our pick'em.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, man. No one really saw that coming either. The Rams just, kind of folded. And anytime that, you have your head coach go out and say after the game that specifically the quarterback didn't play well, you can tell that they're, frustrated in not only his play but the team's play as a whole. The Rams have been playing pretty well as of late and put themselves in a really good spot, but that one hurts, especially because it's a divisional game, so it counts more in their race with the Falcons and Cardinals, and they would have liked to have taken advantage of that. But it was good to see for once, the 49ers had some of their players at least. Richard Sherman hadn't played since week 1, I believe, and Mostert hadn't played in a really long time either. And they were both pretty impactful. Sherman had a pick and made a couple other good plays. So it was a good sign for them as a team to see that and to, kind of take that moving forward into next year and hope they can get everyone healthy.
For our next game, the Chiefs-Bucks, this was one of the games of the week. And by final score, it looked like a much better game than it actually was. Late, the Bucks got going, and I think it was just way too late. But early, the Chiefs just dominated. Patrick Mahomes continues to show why he's the best quarterback in the league. Threw for 462 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Tyreek Hill had 269 yards and 3 touchdowns. So it was kind of like a video game for them. It seems like most weeks are. They put up crazy numbers. Tyreek Hill had 100 and some receiving yards in the first quarter, I think, which is just insane. But Brady for the Bucks, Brady to Gronk's back. They're playing really well together. But with all those weapons that they have, they need to get something more going on offense earlier in the game. They were down 17, I think, and scored 2 back-to-back touchdowns and made it a 3-point game, which was the final. But if it wasn't for that, they would have gotten blown out. And like I said, it was just too late to score 2 touchdowns. But if they would have gotten going earlier, it may have been a different ending. But like I said, just Chiefs continue to show why they're the best team in the league, and Patrick Mahomes continued to show why he's the best quarterback in the league.
Yeah, man, the Chiefs made it look easy, especially in the first half. They were torching that young secondary who had struggled at times in terms of giving up big plays, and that's basically exactly what they did. If they had really targeted Tyreek Hill at all in the second half, he probably breaks the receiving yards record. But, they kind of just relaxed a little bit and gave the Bucs a chance. But the Bucs just don't have a consistent downfield passing game. That's kind of hurting them, and especially when you have weapons like Gronk, AB, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, you expect that to be an element of your game. And they have had a solid running game for the most part. They got their best offensive lineman back in Ali Marpet and still didn't look like they were able to make, enough improvements. Tom Brady just didn't look consistent. And, people are kind of talking about like, okay, well, do they put the blame on the coach or on the quarterback or what is it? You have to put you have to look at all those areas. And obviously Tom Brady's the GOAT and everyone, kind of establishes him as that and respects him for that. But at the end of the day, people are worried about how you're playing right now. And he just hasn't been playing like the GOAT right now. So it's a tough reality for them and especially for him, because he's so used to winning and you expect to win when you have all that talent. But it just doesn't look, like the same Tom Brady right now.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing, like late in games, I'm not sure if it's his awareness or what, but it seems like he has been throwing a lot of costly interceptions, which we never, ever saw when he was in New England. Yeah. But for our next game, the Packers-Bears, like we've said, the Bears just aren't very good. And it kind of shown against the Packers. Trubisky, he played bad. I can't justify, like he played bad, but I think once the Bears kind of understood what was beating the Packers, they started throwing the ball underneath, and that was really helping. But other than that, when they tried to throw it down the field, Trubisky just really struggled, and the Bears' offense struggled. But for the Bears, like I said, I think Allen Robinson has to get out of Chicago after this year. He's such a good wide receiver, and if you put him with an average or a good or even average quarterback, I think he stands out and is one of the top receivers in the league. But for the Packers, I think Aaron Rodgers should be getting some more MVP. Should be getting in the MVP conversation a little bit more. Maryland alum Darnell Savage had 2 interceptions, which was really big for them. Just overall, the Packers outplayed the Bears in every aspect. And like I said, the Packers are a team to beat in the NFC going down the road.
Yeah, man, the Packers made it look easy. And honestly, everyone knows that was what they should have done against the Bears. Like you said, anytime they tried to pass the ball downfield, it just looked really bad. Savage took advantage of that twice, and the rest of the team took advantage as well. The Bears, it's just tough. I agree about Allen Robinson, man. It's got to be hard as a receiver. You can get open, you can make those big plays, and you just can't get the ball. I haven't played receiver in a really long time, so I just know that's tough, man, especially when your team needs it. That's what your team needs to set it apart. You've got a solid defense who can keep you in games. They don't really have a running game either, I guess, so that part makes it tough. But neither quarterback has proven to really help them a lot. I know that they switched play calling from Nagy to the offensive coordinator. That doesn't seem like that's helping either. So it seems like they've exhausted all their options, and they're going to have to figure out, a new way to get things done.
For our next game, the Monday Night Football Seahawks-Eagles, this was not a surprise at all. DK Metcalf had another huge week. He's now leading the NFL in receiving. Before the game, I think Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce were the top 2, but after this game, DK took over number 1 again. Russell Wilson played pretty good, nothing too much. It was a pretty easy game for them. I think the big difference is just Carson Wentz struggling. He doesn't have a good offensive line or really any weapons besides the tight ends, but I see him miss a lot of open guys, and it seems like he favors the tight ends much more than he does any of the receivers. And I don't know if that's because the receivers aren't getting open or what, but it just seems like he kind of only gives the tight ends looks. And when he gives the receivers looks, he just makes a horrible throw. Like late in the game, the one interception he threw, I don't know if that was the tight end didn't know the route or what it was, but it was just really bad, and it continued to make Carson Wentz look bad. But I don't think the Eagles should give up on him yet. I know Hurts will be ready to go whenever he gets a chance, and Hurts proved while he was at Alabama and Oklahoma that he's a really good quarterback. But I think Wentz still has a little bit left, and I don't think the Eagles should give up on him until they get him some weapons or even a good offensive line, because right now the offensive line is just not healthy enough. But like I said, the Seahawks, no surprise here, the Seahawks were just way better than the Eagles were last night.
Yeah, man, the Seahawks did what they needed to do all around. DK continues, to have a dominant season. He can basically do whatever he wants, and he did it last night against Darius Slay, who's a really good corner. But I agree, man. It's a tough subject with Wentz and with their head coach because, just so recently we remember he was on his way to easily being the MVP, and then, he gets hurt. And really since then, it just hasn't been the same. And it's tough because, you saw what he could be, and, you invested so much in him, paid him so much money. And, you have all these other excuses going around with, the O-line injuries, the lack of really playmaking at wide receiver. There's been injuries at running back. There's just really not a whole lot to go off of right now. You don't know if you can put it all on him. And then if you put it on someone else, well, when, does that eventually end? And the leash, just you have to pull on it a little bit. It's just tough, man. And I heard that they were talking about the head coach, potentially being fired, which is hard because he led them to their only Super Bowl too. So it's just really tough, man, when you have guys who have experienced such great success at one point in time, which wasn't very long or, too many years ago, like 2-3 years. To have such a drastic shift and be talking about, potentially moving on from your quarterback and moving on from your head coach when you have those memories fresh in your mind is crazy.
So before we get into our picks, since the Ravens Steelers haven't played yet, and we did kind of a brief summary last week during the picks, we're going to do a quick kind of expectation for the game. So I think the Ravens Steeler game, I think we both said we think the Steelers will win. But I think it'll be closer than people think. All week the Steeler fans have been saying how the Ravens have kind of been, I guess, getting away with whenever they want. But I mean, they had 23 guys test positive for COVID. And a lot of people were comparing it to the Broncos situation, saying the Broncos were forced to play, but the Ravens aren't. But the Broncos have one guy test positive, whereas the Ravens have had 23. So I don't think that's very much comparable. But I think the Steelers will win, but I think it'll be by a touchdown or a field goal. I really don't see it being a blowout because Ravens coach John Harbaugh usually gets the guys going, but the Ravens still got all their linebackers and their cornerbacks and safeties. So I think it'll be a pretty close game. So I think the Steelers will win probably by like 4-7. I don't think they'll blow them out, and I know the spread is 10. I do not think the Steelers will beat the Ravens by 10 or more points.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting just because it's been so long. I don't think even with everything going on and the game being pushed back, I still don't think the Ravens have had an actual football practice since, which is crazy to think about because, even in the era of lighter practicing and not having pads on as much, you still are out there running around doing something on the field, and they really haven't been able to do any of that. I think it'll be at least competitive because they're able to get their running backs back at least. They won't have Lamar, but like you said, they'll have a lot of their defense, a lot of their key guys back. So they'll at least have most of their team, which, again, is different than the Denver situation, like you said. But I definitely think the Steelers still win. It'll be interesting just because after such a extended layoff and period without really playing any football, I think it might be sloppy to start for both sides. You just got to get back in the flow of playing football. It's never happened before that it's been so long in the middle of a season where you just can't practice, can't play, can't really do anything, just sitting around waiting.
Yeah, and also I heard snow may be a factor, so I think might be better for the Ravens just because the Steelers aren't going to be able to throw the ball as much, but we'll see. So for our picks, you're now winning 28-25. The Steeler game, still hasn't been played yet. We both took the Steelers. The Chiefs, Bucks. I took the Bucks. You took the Chiefs, so you beat me there. The Titans, Colts. I took the Titans and you took the Colts, so I beat you there. And then 49ers, Rams. We both took the Rams, and Bears, Packers. We both took the Packers. But for this week, our first game, the Browns, Titans. This week it was tough choosing games just because there weren't really too many good games. But for the Browns, Titans, I went with the Titans. I just, like I said earlier, really I'm not too high on the Browns. They're winning games, but right now I just think the Titans are playing way too good of football to lose to the Browns, and I really do not see the Browns defense stopping Derrick Henry.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna agree. I feel like the Titans are playing well, and they are a late season, postseason push type of team, or at least they have been the last couple of years. And Browns are good record-wise, like we've talked about, but I just don't see them doing enough to be able to slow down Derrick Henry and do anything against that defense.
For our next game, the Rams, Cardinals. I'm gonna go with the Cardinals. Both of them are coming off really poor performances, but I think the Cardinals are the better team out of the two, and I think Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins are really going to have a good week. But DeAndre Hopkins is going to be up against Jalen Ramsey, which will definitely be very tough for him. And, last week he went against Stephon Gilmore, and now he's going against Jalen Ramsey. So it's back-to-back weeks going against tough defensive backs. But I'm going to take the Cardinals. I think Kyler Murray will get it going a little bit more in the running game as well. And I just overall think the Cardinals will win this game. But whoever wins this game is probably going to get into the playoffs, and the other one may be eliminated, which is kind of crazy. But just because it's such a good division and the conference is so good, I definitely think the winner of this gets into the playoffs.
Yeah, man, I agree. I think this is a huge game for both sides. I'm going to take the Cardinals, too, just because I feel like the way their team is built around a really dynamic offense, you expect them to not have consecutive performances like they did, a week ago. So I think they'll bounce back, and it'll be a tough matchup because I think Aaron Donald will be getting after Kyler Murray all game, and like you said, DeAndre Hopkins versus Jalen Ramsey will be a good matchup. And really, the whole Rams secondary has been playing well lately. So that'll be one to watch. Obviously, the Cardinals have a lot of speed on the outside and a lot of guys who can make plays. And I think their offense bounces back and gets it done.
The Bills 49ers, I'm going with the Bills. The 49ers proved me wrong last week, like I said earlier, but I just don't think they have what it takes to beat the Bills right now. 100% healthy, I think this is a much better game, but the Bills know they need these wins to get into the playoffs, and I think they'll get the win against a pretty banged-up still 49ers team.
Yeah, I think so too, man. I think, the Bills, the big game that they have on the rest of their schedule marked is that Steelers game. I think that'll be one to watch, and I think heading into that, both teams are going to be, hoping to play at their, peak levels, especially because it'll be a reflection of a potential rematch in the playoffs. So I think the Bills will be able to take care of San Francisco. I don't think the 49ers will be able to play, two big games back-to-back with the roster they have right now.
So because I said we really didn't have too many good games this week, I had to put the Patriots-Chargers on here. It's a pretty tough one to pick. I took the Chargers. Neither team will be in the playoffs probably, but both of them have played pretty well against good teams and played bad against bad teams. So I'm going to go with the Chargers. I just think Justin Herbert will have his day against the Patriots defense, who's actually played well this year. And I don't think Cam is playing as well as he was earlier in the year or in previous years. So I'm definitely going to take the Chargers this week, and I think Herbert gets it done against New England.
Yeah, I think this one's tough just because, both teams have been so interesting this year overall. But I feel like the Chargers, they kind of did last week what they've done all year, which is play close and play competitive and just not do enough at the end. I could see that happening against the Patriots again, so I'll go with New England. I still don't see their offense being extremely dynamic just because they just haven't been all year this year. But I think they'll find a way to do enough. I think their defense will get it together to hold the Chargers to just enough to win.
For our last game, I said it last week. I think this is the easiest game of the week. The Steelers versus Washington football team. But I think this will definitely be the easy pick. Last week, the 49ers Rams won. Proved both of us wrong, but obviously I'm going to go with the Steelers. Like I said earlier, it just wasn't really enough good games, and I wanted to put the best record team in this. But, the Washington football team's been playing very good lately. They, as I said, have a chance to compete in the playoffs. And if they pull off this upset, they probably will be getting into the playoffs. But I don't think there's any possible way they beat the Steelers. The Steelers have played down to opponents sometimes, but it's just unrealistic to take the Washington football team to beat the Steelers this week.
Yeah, like I said, this matchup is kind of just a benefit that the whole division has had playing the NFC East this year as their crossover matchup. So it's been fortunate, for the Browns and for the Steelers. And I think it'll be at least a somewhat decent game just because the Redskins are a more well-rounded team than the rest of the NFC East is right now. I think, the Washington defense could have some success potentially against Pittsburgh. Maybe they put some pressure on Big Ben. But I still don't see them being able to do enough. Like you said, I think Pittsburgh's able to win that one.
So for our college football picks, Ohio State, Illinois was canceled this week because of Ohio State, with some COVID issues. But Maryland, Indiana, that was, I was really pulling for Maryland. But it was just a tough game. They had so many guys out with COVID. They had a freshman corner that was out. And then on offense, Raheem Jarrett, he was out. Jay Sean Jones was out. So just overall, Maryland was dealing with a little bit too much. And Indiana was healthy as far as most of the game. It was tough to see Penix go down. I think he tore his ACL, which is really sad to see. Or he tore his Achilles, one of the two. But it's tough to see such a good quarterback go down with an injury like that. And hopefully he has a speedy recovery. But Indiana's been playing like one of the top teams in college football overall. They lost to one of the best teams, Ohio State, by one score. And as we said last week, one or two different plays, that's a different game. So overall, I think Maryland, if they were at full health, I think they definitely have a better chance of beating Indiana. And even during the game, Talia missed some throws. And overall, they just didn't play too well. But at the end of the day, they lost by, I think, 16, which is pretty crazy given the fact that they were without so many guys.
Yeah, man. I mean, when you're missing, two of your top three receivers, your top running back, top safety, one of your corners, like that's just hard to come back from. But, there's so much to take from this game for Maryland because they started off extremely well on both sides, but you have to finish. They kind of had the same issue we had in Indiana 2 years ago. We started off really hot, got all the way down the field, and then we ended up settling for 2 field goals back-to-back in that game. But, this game, they missed a wide-open touchdown. You can't have that when you're playing against a really good team. You have to take advantage of every opportunity, and they missed the field goal. So that just hurts, man. That sets you back, and it leaves room for a team to do what they're going to do, late once they get things together. And that's kind of what Indiana did. And even still, Maryland was in the game for the most part and had plenty of opportunities. That's the thing. Like you said, Talia missed some throws. There were some drops. Just a couple poor issues on defense that made the game, just unable to overcome those issues. And, part of that could be those players that were missing, probably had some guys in some spots they hadn't been in a while. And when you're doing that against a team that has been playing as good as Indiana has, that's just not, to your advantage at all. But like you said, it sucks to see Penix go down. That's 2 years in a row, man, that he's been hurt, and it's coming off of him playing like, a Heisman candidate type player for Indiana. And, their season has had so much promise and really still does. They said that the guy that they have as their backup was a transfer who was like a 4-star, Elite 11 type kid coming out of high school. So it sounds like he's a decent quarterback, and with all the weapons he has around him and the way their defense has been playing, they can still be extremely competitive through the rest of their season and into bowl season.
Yeah, for sure. So for our first pick this week, Illinois versus Iowa, I'm going to have to take Iowa. I just think coming off of basically bye week for Illinois will be tough for them. If they can get their running game going, they'll definitely compete with Iowa. But since their first 2 losses, Iowa has been on pretty much a roll. They're ranked again. They've been playing good football, and I just don't see Illinois taking down Iowa this week.
Yeah, Iowa's definitely bounced back from a surprising start. It's crazy. I was watching their game the other day, man, and I saw them in 5 wide, which, if Iowa are used to 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends even, and 2 running backs. So it's interesting to see that, how their program is kind of shifting and they're doing some new things. But I don't think Illinois is able to beat them, like you said. Probably just not an opportune time to play a team like that. And when Iowa does want to get physical, they certainly can. and I don't know if Illinois is going to be able to stop that.
For our next game, the Maryland-Michigan game, it's kind of surprised me. Maryland's the underdog. I'm going to take Maryland. I just don't think they'll lose to Michigan. You know, it's at Michigan, and it's actually supposed to snow, so that might be a factor. But I just think Maryland, you know, I think they'll get some guys back. I'm not exactly sure. I know the Big Ten has a 21-day period that you have to sit out if you test positive. But I think if Maryland gets some guys back and they play like they did early in the game against Indiana, I think Maryland will definitely beat Michigan, who's having a big down year. And it'll be big if they can get Taldia going and playing like he did a little bit earlier this year.
Yeah, man, this is definitely a time and the year to steal some games for Maryland. Like you said, hopefully they get those guys back because that'll give them a lot more power and weapons, which they need. Specifically, if they're able to get Jake Funk back. I mean, he was averaging like 120 yards a game, which really helps them set up the passing game, which is what they've been taking advantage of in those wins that they had before they kind of got shut down. So if they're able to do that and get those guys back, then this is the year to beat Michigan. They don't know what they're doing on offense, and on defense, they've kind of been exposed really all season long. Guys have just been able to do what they want to do, which is interesting for a Michigan team to be set up like that. There's no one that really sticks out that you're like, okay, this guy is going to be unstoppable, or this is their big weapon. So Maryland needs to take advantage, man. They need to have a solid game plan, get guys back if they can, and take advantage of every opportunity and limit the mistakes.
So before we go for the rest of college football, this week wasn't too much surprises. The main surprise was Oregon losing to Oregon State. Jamar Jefferson for Oregon State had a huge day running the ball. It was 226 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's Pac-12 defenses. We see a lot of running backs blow up sometimes, but it just wasn't expected against Oregon. Also in college football, Jarrett Patterson, running back for Buffalo, rushed for 409 yards and 8 touchdowns. He tied the rushing touchdown record. The coach benched him, which he, I guess, had to because they were winning by so much against Kent State late. But if he would have had one more touchdown, 9 would have been the record, which is pretty crazy. Penn State finally gets their first win against Michigan. Not too much. I guess Penn State fans are excited, but it's not too much of an accomplishment given the way that Michigan's played all year. And then lastly, Florida for Kyle Pitts for Florida has just been insane all year. He had 6 or 7 catches, I think, for 80 yards, I think, and 3 touchdowns. So Kyle Pitts just, I think, could be the first tight end that is a nominee for Heisman. I don't think he'll win it just because some quarterbacks are playing too good, but I think he'll be a nominee.
Yeah, man, I think, it was definitely an interesting week all around. When it comes to Florida, the quarterback, Kyle Trask, has been literally unstoppable all year, and so has Kyle Pitts. He just had a concussion, I think, that held him out for 1 or 2 games. But, I mean, literally every time, they're talking about him, they're saying he's got 2 or 3 touchdowns in a game, which for a tight end is just crazy. So he's putting himself in a great position, and so is the quarterback. Arguably they could both go, and no one will really be mad about them being Heisman candidates, which is crazy to think about because you just never hear that from a tight end. But as for the rest of college football, man, it was great to hear the story of the girl kicking for Vanderbilt. I know they had a bunch of issues with, I think it was COVID going through their team and specifically the kicking department. And, before Derek Mason got fired, he was talking about how, basically their whole special teams room got it. And so none of them could play, and they're doing virtual school, so they couldn't even hold a real tryout. So, I mean, he probably didn't have anyone else to turn to besides her, and then she ends up coming through. It'll be interesting to see, maybe, in the next couple games, obviously they have a new coach and everything, but if they actually get in field goal range, which I heard is hard for them, she might be able to kick a field goal, man, and set some more records, which is pretty crazy stuff to think about, just because, you just never heard of it. You hear about that in, Little League and stuff every now and then. There's, one girl who's willing to do that, but at the collegiate level, especially in the SEC, it's just, crazy to think about.
Yeah, and as you say that, it's kind of weird. I saw a lot of people in the media slamming her and saying whatever they want, but most importantly, everybody who was on Twitter or on their phone typing that was the one that's sitting there watching the game and watching her play a Division I sport of football, and she also won an SEC championship in soccer. So I just think there's a lot of weirdos out there who are, saying, they wanted to see her get tackled or say whatever. So to everybody who kind of said that, you're just an idiot, to be completely honest. You're upset that a girl is playing football before you are. You've probably never played football in your life, and there's a reason you're sitting at home, watching the game. But like you said, Vanderbilt just struggles so much. I really wanted to see her get a chance to kick a field goal. We saw her kick the ball off once, but I think the closest they were was a 52-yarder, and they didn't try it. I think they got 2 penalties, and just Vanderbilt just struggles too much on offense. But hopefully down the road we can see her get a shot at kicking a field goal, and hopefully they can maybe get to the 30 or anything closer than that, so they can maybe have an actual chance at scoring a field goal. But thank you guys for watching. That is it for the episode. Like I said last week, please be on the lookout. We're going to have a lot of interviews coming. We've been reaching out to a lot of people, and we're starting to hear back as the seasons are coming to an end, and we'll definitely have some interesting content coming down the road.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it, man.